You're listening to an interview I recorded for Behind the Vinyl, a different podcast I co-host from time to time. You can find them on Instagram at Behind the Vinyl Pod and anywhere podcasts are available. And now let's get on with the interview. Really excited to be here with Conor from VHS Collection today. They just put out their new single Survive as well as an accompanying video, and their new album Night Drive is due out February 25th. Conor, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, so from what I understand, this will be your first full-length album in like 3 or 4 years. Is that right?
Yeah, it's crazy to think about.
Yeah, how does that feel?
It feels like time has definitely been flying by. I can't believe it's been as long as it has been since we put out our last album. But yeah, we started working on these songs a long time ago, and some of them we've been sitting on for a while. Some of them we just wrapped up kind of, a couple months ago, I guess about a year ago now. But it feels great to finally be, putting out new music that we've been working on for a long time. So
definitely. Do you think it would have happened sooner had the pandemic not happened? Yeah,
definitely. We basically had the intention to record our album in the spring of 2020. We had everything scheduled. We were going to go in the studio in April of 2020. And then we had a tour booked for the fall of 2020. So we kind of like set ourselves up where we had this deadline. We were like, we got to go out. We have the dates booked. And then, the pandemic happened and the recording process changed, and obviously the tour got canceled. And things just got a bit dragged out, but, we're not the only ones who are in that situation. So it is what it is. And here we are.
Yeah, definitely. I was reading that despite the pandemic, the album was recorded entirely in the company of one another. Is that right?
Kind of.
Okay.
So we had, we had written a lot of songs, during the year leading up to the album, just kind of here and there in different kind of settings. And we kind of collected the songs and had, like I said, had the idea of going in the studio together in April of 2020. And those studio sessions got canceled. And, we really wanted to work on songs and finish songs. So we started doing stuff remotely. Survive was actually largely done remotely. The song had been written, but then actually producing the song, James and Nils were in New York. I was in, my house in LA. Tony Hoffer, who we were working with on the production, was in his studio, and we ended up just kind of working on it remotely. So Tony kind of worked on some production stuff, and I kind of was recording all the guitars in my studio and then sending files around. And then James was recording vocals in New York, and it was interesting. I mean, we got it done. It was definitely painful at times because normally you're in the studio together,
right? And
there's this kind of feedback loop of that's not good enough, or why don't we try this out? And there's some collaboration there. And when that's all done over email, it's kind of brutal.
Yeah,
it's just not the same. But maybe there were some benefits. I don't know, when I was recording the guitars for that song, I was just by myself and had all the time in the world to figure out what I wanted to do. And so we did a couple songs that way, Searching for the Light and Survive. And then we kind of said, we really don't like this process. It's taking forever. We got to figure out a way to get in the studio together. And so we ended up booking time basically in the fall, and we basically all got in the studio together. And, we quarantined before, and, we were just in our little pod, and it was great. I mean, it was nice to be, after being locked, not doing sessions, locked in our houses for so long. It was nice to be together and actually collaborating on the songs. So we did a lot of those songs in that October session. We did The Dark and The Deep End and a couple songs that haven't come out yet. And then we were kind of, I would say 80% done with the album, and the rest of it kind of was done remotely, piecemeal, sending ideas back and forth. So it was not really as planned. We had this idea going in that this album was going to be really cohesive, and we were going to achieve that by all working together, with the same kind of producer, mixer, studio, using the same microphones. Like that was this concept we had in our head, and that kind of got thrown out because of the pandemic, but we got it done. So.
Yeah, good. And you mentioned sort of a positive side to it, if you would call it that, just the idea of being able to just like record the guitar parts, not really having anybody, I don't know, just kind of being able to make it your own, right? Do you think you prefer that process to experimenting in the studio, having people kind of, critique it as you're going along, kind of figuring it out kind of communally, or do you just like being more independent like that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think, for me, I'm a little bit more of I think for songwriting, prefer it to be collaborative. So, coming up with the ideas, coming up with lyrics, coming up with songs, it's really beneficial to kind of like be together, and you have like a surge of energy and everyone's trying to like get the song kind of written in a couple hours.
Yeah.
And I think that, for me, and I think probably for the other guys, that's really difficult to do when you're by yourself. Because a lot of times like you get stuck on an idea and then you kind of give up. Or, whereas like when you're together, you get stuck on an idea, maybe a lyric or a melody or whatever, you kind of like work through it with another person. On the production side of things, I'd say it's a mix. Like I definitely, with like figuring out parts and figuring out how parts lock together, a lot of that for me is like a bit of experimentation. And sometimes that can take a really long time. Like you might be coming up with an idea for a riff, and sometimes it's nice to be able to take like 3 hours to mess with that. Whereas if you were in a room with a bunch of other people, like that might be harder. Sometimes like dialing in like the finer points of a production, it's better just to be like by yourself, kind of staying up late and kind of messing with it until it finally kind of works. But yeah, I mean, to answer your question, like my perfect situation would be a mix, I would say. You're kind of like all working together, and then you get a little bit of time to like mess with ideas on your own, and then you kind of go back and forth until it sounds good, hopefully.
Definitely. So from what I understand as well, the idea behind all getting together in the studio is to kind of preserve the cohesiveness and the energy that's best captured when you're all in the same room together. So were those times that you were able to do that, was it difficult to coordinate? And did you find the energy in the studio to be different or more tense in any way when you did get together?
Just because of the pandemic, you mean?
Yeah.
I mean, there was definitely a weird energy in I think everyone's like lives. It was, there was weird energy permeating, I think, you couldn't really escape it. But I think the studio sessions for this album went pretty well. I think we were actually kind of like relieved to be laughing and, hanging out in the studio, and a lot of people's lives have been kind of like boring up to that point for a couple months. So it's just nice to be like, distracted and making music again together. I don't think those studio sessions were like particularly tense or anything like that. Like I think it generally went pretty well. I think we kind of like ran out of time, which was a little bit annoying. I mean, quarantining before was arduous, especially for James and Nils, because they had flown from New York out to LA and were like staying in an Airbnb for 2 weeks with nowhere to go. But yeah.
Well, I'm glad to hear it wasn't too crazy once you guys actually managed to all meet up. And this is just something I was thinking about as you were talking. How long exactly did it take to record the album? Because I know you said that you guys started at least writing a while ago.
Yeah. So writing wise, we all write songs, the three of us, and they kind of come in different ways. Like sometimes it'll be like one or two of us kind of coming up with an idea. And then sometimes it'll be the three of us. Sometimes it'll be, a co-writer will be involved,
okay.
Someone from another band or something like that.
Cool.
So we kind of we do a lot of demoing, just writing lots of ideas. And we kind of never know, when the good ones are going to come and when the bad ones are going to come. And we had accumulated about 100 songs, I think, for this album. And we had stuff like we were writing for this album. And then we had songs like Space Between, for example, was a song that got rejected from the previous album.
Okay.
But then we kind of listened to it again and we were like, all right, we actually like this. So yeah, so we had this big SoundCloud playlist of demo ideas, and we were kind of picking through those for a while, discussing, there's a lot of discussion about which ones we were going to do. Some were clear winners, and then half of them were kind of debated with other songs.
Okay.
And So that process, the writing process was over a year. We were kind of doing other stuff, just writing here and there. And then the production process, like, I think if we're working really well, we can do a song in 3 days, not including the mix, if it's all kind of like laid out, and that's kind of normal for us. But because this album was kind of stretched out and we did things in different time periods, it probably took a year for us to, like, from when we started recording songs to when we actually, finished the final mix. Mm-hmm. And we don't love that. Like, we would have preferred to, like, get it done in a shorter period of time. But that's just kind of how it went down.
That's interesting that it took that long, obviously just because of the situation. But do you look back on, like, the first few demos, let's say, for the album that eventually made it into songs? Do you look back on those and think that maybe your style has changed in any way in the past, year or whatever it's been, and just think, oh, okay, that's interesting. You can kind of think about where your mind was at when you were writing or recording it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would say also some of the songs, the demo was like 90% of what the final production was. I mean, The final production would, like, maybe hopefully sound a lot better. But, like, everything was, like, written, almost all the parts, all the lyrics, in like 4 hours. And then there were some other songs that were, where we made a lot of changes from, like, the demo to what you heard. Finally, like, Survive was an example of a song that was totally different from the demo to, like, the final production. The demo was like an acoustic song. Oh, wow. And then this, like, crazy big production.
Yeah.
Whereas a song like The Deep End, that was one where, what you hear is, like, pretty close to what we had in the original writing session. So just back to your question about, does your style change? I think your style changes, and, your mood kind of changes. Like, we didn't know the exact direction of the album when we were kind of first starting to write it. And then when we were about halfway through or getting kind of closer to the end, we started to really grasp onto this, like, night drive idea. And then we kind of we ended up having this, like, darker aesthetic to the album. And it's funny because, like, the pandemic was kind of dark and it seemed to fit. But then now that we're coming out of it and the album's being released, we're probably thinking, like, oh, now we want to write, like, a happier sounding album because like, this summer is going to be a more, like, joyful, like, celebratory time. And then by the time we finish writing that, putting that out, everyone's probably going to be in, like, a dark, depressed mood again and want some moody music. So, but it's weird. Like, I mean, and lyrically, like, a lot of the experiences that we would have written about, now might have happened 2 years ago or something. So, like, we're all just, like, in different phases of our life. But
well, that actually reminds me. I was reading some old interviews that you guys have done just in preparation for this one. And in the preface of one that you did with, I think it was College Media Network back in 2019, they say that VHS Collection is and this is a quote, go-to music choice when driving through town on a sunny day. And I just found that funny, especially because we're talking about night drive. But it's also, I think it's true too, because, like, your music easily fits into either scenario. So is this type of versatility in your music something that you aim for, or does it just come organically, or is it maybe a little bit of both?
I mean, I think we wanted to have a bit more of, like, a mood for this album.
Yeah, for sure.
And the previous album was done with actually a lot of different producers also on the previous album. So, like, we liked the previous album, but it did feel more of, like, a hodgepodge of really different styles, like sonically and whatnot. Yeah. So I don't know. I think, and then the previous album, we had, like, Waiting in the Summer, and then we had, like, The Black, we had, like, very different kind of sounding songs.
Yeah.
So I don't know. We always have, like, a certain intention, I think, of, like, what we're trying to do, but then sometimes something different happens. Like, I definitely do respect artists that have this kind of, like, maybe they have, like, a lot of diversity in the songs across their careers, but I like when artists have kind of a cohesiveness on individual albums.
Definitely.
I think that's cool, and it can change. And I think we'll always have a certain approach to writing songs.
Right.
But I think, like, the mood of our next album might be a bit different. But yeah, I mean, the other thing is, like, I think we were referencing more other bands when we were working previously. So we'd be like, all right, let's try to make this sound like Phoenix and the Killers and Daft Punk. And, we used to spend a ton of time like on reference lists of like, all right, like let's make the drums sound like this album, or let's make the synth sound like this thing from this like Phoenix album or something like that.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like as we were establishing our sound and our way of writing. And I think on this album, we did less of that because we had like more of a clear direction on our VHS kind of way of writing songs.
Yeah.
And like what that kind of sounds like. Not to say we still don't like pull references and kind of grab ideas from like, other artists, but yeah.
Do you prefer one style to the other? I know you said you still pull references and stuff, but not as much this time. Is that right?
I think we had like come up with this idea of like what a VHS song sounds like.
Okay.
If we looked at, the previous album, we were like, all right, we really like the way Sign sounded on the last album.
Yeah.
We really like the way like One sounded on the last album. So can we maybe center this album more around like that aesthetic? And it's like, how are we blending electronic elements with organic elements? How are we blending kind of synths and guitars? How are we making it like make sense in a live setting? We toured after the last album too. And so like, I think there's a feedback loop when you play these songs live and you're like, oh, sweet. Like this song well live. And then you're like, all right, like that's maybe people like that song, but like, we don't really like playing that one live. So I think that definitely informs your decisions as well.
Definitely.
I think we haven't really been thinking about like our next songs. We've had a break from that. We've just been thinking about like putting out this music. So
that's good.
We haven't even discussed how we're going to approach the next one. So it'll be interesting. I have this idea of like, I don't know. I go back and forth, I guess. Part of me is like, yeah, let's do something that sounds totally different. And part of me is like, let's stick with this Night Drive thing and like kind of improve upon that.
I did want to talk about like the title of the album really quick because it really did stick out to me. The idea of Night Drive as the title of the upcoming album, as I understand it, is mostly literal, right? It's like describing the experience of driving at night and not just like listening to music, but really like experiencing it in a different way. So, and I really think that's something that a lot of people can relate to. Is this album something that you're hoping everyone can relate to in some way?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's regarding the title of the album.
Yeah.
We felt like once we actually came up with Night Drive as the idea, there wasn't that much debate of other album names.
It's a good name.
So that was nice not to have to like kind of argue about that, that piece of the project. Yeah. But yeah, we had written like The Dark, we had written The Deep End. We had this kind of cinematic like idea about those songs, and we're almost like picturing like what sorts of movies they would be in when we were writing them.
Cool.
And I think like around that time we stumbled across Night Drive, and I think this concept of like growing up and you get your license and you're like driving around kind of at night, or you're with your friends like driving at night playing music, like discovering music, or you're by yourself on some cross-country road trip and it's 2 a.m. and you're trying to like get to the next city, and you're playing music to like keep you awake. And I don't know, I think that's like a really important musical experience. It's like, to me, that's almost as big as like going to a concert.
Oh yeah.
Like, and I think that's like a universal thing that like every music fan experiences. And so we loved it. It also had this kind of retro 80s kind of thing that it made me think of for some reason. Not that we try not to be like too on the nose with that stuff, but it just seemed to kind of make sense. So yeah. So what was the other part of your question?
It was, I think you pretty much hit it. It was just about it being relatable to people. And like you said, that's really something that pretty much every music fan can relate to. I just think the setting of night, driving someplace or nowhere in particular and just listening to music with friends, whatever. Yeah, I really like that idea. I think it's cool. Yeah,
I have like visceral, like, I just have like these very clear memories of moments like that where, it's just like very intimate, and hopefully like, listening to music in the car can also be. It depends on your system. It can be sometimes like the best. Like sometimes you can't like crank music in your house or something like that.
Right.
And in your car can really blast it. So
definitely. Switching real quick to the video for Survive, I really liked it. It contains, from, just my first impression, a lot of footage of just regular people kind of doing just regular stuff, which I think helps to emphasize the universal nature of the song a little bit. So would you mind speaking to that a little bit more?
Yeah. So the video, we were throwing around a lot of different ideas for the video.
Yeah.
And we wanted to do something that obviously felt like it was relevant to the song.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about having actors kind of act out different scenes and how they're surviving in their real life. And then we got nervous that that would come across kind of corny. And we were like, what if the actors are bad? Or we never really made a video. But yeah, then we kind of came across this idea of okay, well, what if we just kind of capture this tapestry of surviving in America, and what that means and what that looks like. And instead of getting a bunch of actors, we just capture people in their real lives, in their real settings. And we thought that, there was a pretty good chance that we could pull that off.
Yeah.
And, we haven't made a ton of videos. So that was a big consideration. It's how can we get this thing? How can we get this song to resonate? How can we get this video to resonate with the song? And have it feel authentic and have it not feel corny and not have a risk of, we spent all this money in this video and now we can't use it. So just being fully transparent about that. So we found this director named Joe, and he just had a really good eye, and he had filmed a lot of kind of crazy stuff. He clearly was not a person who was scared to get his hands dirty.
Mm-hmm.
And he kind of had this, just you could see from his video, from his work that he was kind of a wild man. So we hired him, and Joe drove around the country, filming people all through America. He started in LA. He went to Arizona, and then he went down south to Louisiana, and then he came up to New York and filmed a bunch of stuff with us. And just put it together. And I think it speaks for itself, what it's about. But we didn't want the video to be depressing. We wanted it the song is kind of angsty and a little bit dark, but we also wanted the video to be kind of uplifting at the same time. So that's what we were trying to achieve.
Yeah. So it's just random people that he filmed just kind of going about their lives.
Yeah, literally. I mean, we were brainstorming for a while, just talking about different things that Joe could capture. We were talking about the idea was for him to go to 5 or 6 different towns, and we were can we get some wrestlers or people fighting or people skateboarding or people jumping out of planes or and so we kind of had a little brainstorming session, mapped out some things that we thought would be cool. And then Joe kind of went on his way and just ended up filming a bunch of stuff that he found on his journey. And then, we filmed a bunch of stuff in New York, and it's kind of our first go at a music video. I mean, we've been pretty much independent since we started the band, and now we have a label. So we have a little bit of money to pay for a video.
Good.
Do you like the video? How'd we do?
Oh yeah, no, the video is great. I was actually gonna ask, I think it's so cool to hear the thought process behind it, the brainstorming. You're saying people fighting, and I loved. I think it was a boxer in the video, and that was super cool. So I'm actually curious, what was your first impression when you saw the video?
I loved it. I mean, I think Joe did a really good job of capturing Joe totally got the idea that in order to make it work, he needed to go out and capture some crazy stuff.
Yeah.
I think I don't know. I haven't worked with that many video directors. Maybe they're all a little bit crazy, but I think it takes some balls to go out and find these random people and then be hey, let's go.
I'd be too shy to do that for sure.
Yeah. So if you think about if you were tasked with that idea and you had to pull it off, I don't know. I think you did a good job. And I think videos can get really, really expensive too. And I think we asked Joe to do this and he was all right, sweet. I can pull it off. I'm going to drive around and kind of DIY it. And then, seeing ourselves in the video, that's always weird. But I think it came across pretty good.
Yeah. And I mean, especially for more or less a first attempt at a music video, I think it really turned out great.
Yeah, we had one other attempt that we don't want to talk about, but it makes me excited to do more, to be honest. I think it's hard to do. Like it made me appreciate like a lot of, work I've seen from other artists and realize like, okay, a lot probably went into putting this together.
Absolutely.
I definitely want to do more.
Cool. Yeah. You did just mention too, for the longest time, you guys were a fully independent band and just recently got a label. So I know in the past you guys were fairly outspoken about like the pros essentially of being a fully independent band and how that's worked out well for you, especially after you started gaining more popularity. Have you noticed any drawbacks to being on a label now, like any constraints at all?
I think we're in the middle of, this album with the label.
Yeah.
And, I think that the drawbacks are there's a lot more people involved in any decisions, and there's a lot more time that it's taken us a lot more time to like release stuff. And when we started the band, we didn't have a label. We were just uploading songs on TuneCore. We were playing live shows. We would, record some songs. We would make the artwork, and then we would be like, all right, like let's put this next single out like in a month. We have this show coming up. Like let's put out a track before that.
Yeah.
And we weren't from the music industry, so like that just kind of like made sense. And we were like, let's get this thing off the ground. Like let's just like keep moving. Like we don't want to wait too long.
Yeah.
So that's just how we did it. And some of the songs kind of ended up doing pretty well. And we were touring, and it's hard to know, like looking back, we definitely made a lot of mistakes too. Like, I think there were things that we probably could have made bigger and better, maybe with like some more guidance or maybe with some more promotion. But we were definitely like super nimble, just being like a, kind of just the three of us, like making music, putting it out and touring and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And yeah, like I said before, like the label process is definitely a little bit, we feel like we've been moving like much slower than we have in the past, but we hope that the result will be that the songs will go further. We're trying to figure out how to reach more people. And, we've never really had like a radio hit or anything like that. But yeah, we're in the middle of it. I mean, I think there are a lot of cool things going on with independent artists right now. And I think like a lot of the kind of Web3, like NFT stuff is pretty interesting. And I don't know how many artists that's going to work for. Like it's definitely working out really well for like a couple independent artists.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's, there's so much music coming out. There's so many good artists. It is difficult to like really break through because you're competing with lots of different artists and teams and whatnot. So
right.
We're happy to be trying out this label thing, and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, good. So we keep kind of bouncing around this, but do you guys plan to set up a tour for this album anytime soon?
Yeah, we're looking to do a tour probably just in major markets later this year. So
cool.
We really want to play at Webster Hall in New York.
Yeah.
One of our goals is to sell out Webster Hall. And we had a really cool tour booked like 2020. So, right. But stuff has been getting canceled, and, we have to be mindful of like not signing up for tons of tour expenses. And then like, you got to quit touring in the middle of it. So,
yeah. The other thing that I was going to ask about was, obviously you were just talking about New York City. You guys are from New York City. Do you see that as an important part of the band's identity, or does where you're from not really matter as much when it comes to, say, touring as a band?
So our identity as a New York band, definitely important, definitely a big part of the band, especially like when we started. I don't know, the New York music scene is pretty different from the LA music scene.
Oh yeah.
I've lived in both places. The really cool thing about New York as a band is there's this like great like kind of step ladder of venues. And so when we were first playing, like we'd book these little tiny clubs on the Lower East Side. All our friends would come, and we would do it like every couple of weeks. And then we just kind of like worked our way up this ladder where it was like we finally got to the Mercury Lounge. And then we were like, all right, like let's get to the Bowery Ballroom. All right, let's play like Music Hall of Williamsburg. And yeah, playing that game as like a New York band is really fun. I don't think that exists in LA. Maybe I just don't go to as many shows here as I did in New York, but like I think the venue scene in New York is just like way better, especially for small venues. So it's a little bit less of like a songwriting hustle in LA or in New York. The bands that we like looked up to the most when we were first starting, like the Strokes or like LCD Sound System, you don't get the impression that they were doing the same like pop songwriting hustle that, people in LA are doing, which is cool. I mean, I've written a bunch of songs in LA, and like, I think that's also really cool, but it's just like a different mentality. It's like, I kind of felt like people were more focused on working on their own projects.
Yeah.
Like this idea of like co-writing songs and writing with other people, like, and doing a writing session every day. That wasn't really something we were thinking about when we were starting New York. Like we were going to band practice. We were, we found this producer in Brooklyn named Abe Seaforth, and, we did our first EP with him. And I don't know, it kind of felt like really organic, like just like very different from what's happening in LA, where a lot of people are, writing 100 songs in a year and hoping that like one of them gets cut by a big pop artist. Maybe that's like overgeneralizing, but I don't know.
I think you summed it up pretty well, actually. I hadn't thought of it before, especially kind of like the tiered system in New York City with venues and things like that, and more small, well-known venues versus LA that is just sprawling, Yeah.
Yeah. You could kind of like, I don't know, we would just set up like a show, this is like before we even had an agent, and I would just email a venue and be like, hey, like, we'll bring people to the venue and set up a show and invite all your friends. And that was kind of like how it started. And then, I mean, I lived near the Bowery Ballroom, and I was like always walking by there, and I was like, all right, next year, like we're going to play here.
That's cool. We were just talking about writing a little bit. I was trying to find a way to slip this question in casually, but I just don't think there's a way to do it. There's a friend of mine who is also a big fan of you guys. He gave me this question to ask. If you were forced to have a banjo in one of your songs in some capacity, how would you use it? And you can be as creative as you want with it.
I'm not mad about banjo. I think I could get into like some bluegrass bands for sure. Right. I went to school in Nashville, so
okay,
got some bluegrass bands. But in a VHS song, that guy Yokelore, who we've written a couple songs with, he has like a bunch of banjo and his stuff, and he's like this indie pop artist, which is kind of a weird fit. I would probably just play like one note at a time. One string.
Yeah,
probably wouldn't play like a banjo. I run it through like a distortion pedal or something. I don't know.
So people don't even know it's a banjo.
Yeah. But maybe we'll do like, have you ever heard those like Pickin' On albums?
Yes.
Like they used to do like, they would be like Pickin' On the Grateful Dead or something, and like this bluegrass band would play like an album with like, so it'd be cool to do like a Pickin' On VHS album where the whole album is bluegrass.
That could be like a Bandcamp only release or something like that. Only like the real fans.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. So I'll ask one final question here. What is one thing you want fans to know leading up to the release of this new album?
Well, first and foremost, I hope fans will listen to the whole album. I think, there's a lot of good tracks here. I don't think like, I think we have like a pretty solid like body of work, as an artist. I don't think we think of ourselves as like a single oriented band. Mm-hmm. So first and foremost, I hope that artists will listen through. Second, I don't know, there's more coming, I guess. More shows, more music. And we worked hard on these songs, and we hope that they find their way into people's lives in whatever way that means.
That's super exciting, and I can't wait to see what you guys have next. And for the record, I will just say you were talking about kind of uncertainty surrounding like, I don't know if any of our songs are like radio songs. I was listening to Survive, and I actually thought to myself, this could be something I'd hear on the radio. So
we'll see. We're day one.
Yeah.
We're day one today. Check back in 6 months. We'll see.
All right. Listen to VHS Collection's latest single, Survive, and check out the music video as well for the full effect. Also, mark your calendar for the new album, Night Drive, set to come out on February 25th. Conor, thank you so much for being here.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Of course.